Aloha, I'm Yunji Denise. Welcome to Get Your House in Order, the show where we help you take care of the things that matter most. In this series, we cover a wide range of topics from health and wellness to financial readiness and preparing for every phase of life. Today, we are talking about funeral planning. This can be for someone you love or even yourself if you have very specific ideas of what you want in that final memorial. As always, I'm joined by Paulette Ito of Hawaiian Financial Federal Credit Union. And Paulette, this is one of those topics that a lot of us are uncomfortable talking about, but really is pretty necessary.
Absolutely. Thinking about the future, helps your loved ones because you don't have to, you give them time to grieve, you give them time to talk about what your wishes are instead of them doing it at the end and not doing it with the right frame of mind.
Right, and if you have very specific ideas of what you want, it's better to communicate that way in advance than they read a letter down the line and then suddenly they have to execute what you wanted.
Absolutely, and sometimes they might read the letter too late. Maybe they might find it in a drawer or they might find it in a diary and say, I want this to happen or I want to be cremated, but you didn't cremate them. You might feel horrible not fulfilling their wishes. So it's best to talk to everyone when you can.
Yeah. You've laid out a resource through the credit union. Tell us about that and how this particular part of every phase of life fits into that.
Yes, we have the Ho'okele guidebook, and in the guidebook it helps you give your roadmap of what your wishes are, what your legacy will be, and also to help you currently with your different types of plans that you might have, such as your wills, your trust, your car information, all of those type of things. But with the guidebook, it'll ask you if you do have a funeral plan, where it is, and it'll also ask what your wishes are.
Yeah, something that we all need to think about. There are 3 editions, or 3 chapters, if you will, of the guidebook: past, present, and now we're on future. Tell us what's in this future guidebook and where can we find it?
The future is a little heavy because it's things that you need to think forward thinking about your wills, your trust, retirement, health directives. So things that you want to happen later in life, things that you might have to start the conversation with your loved ones.
Okay, important. And where can we find it?
At our website, hificu.com.
Okay, we'll head there soon. Thank you so much for being here. We are going to be talking with someone who helps folks plan funeral services and find out why making your own arrangements ahead of time can be a huge gift to those you love. But first, let's hear from someone who's experienced firsthand how making these plans can be so healing.
Aloha, I'm Cindy from Oahu, and as a retired family service counselor, I was given the opportunity to share with families and assist them at their time of loss. Losing anyone that you love can be extremely painful, and sitting down and doing an arrangement for that person you love can be extremely emotional, making it very difficult to make decisions for that person. I have witnessed many families mourn, either joyfully, respectfully, or even in great sorrow and uncertainty. I have witnessed times when families have just had a service for their mother, and they asked to step into our office to air their feelings. And in doing so, emotions began to rise, voices became louder, to a point where sisters reached over the table to grab their sister. So much so that the police had to be called to ask them to leave the office, causing so much pain, not just for them, but for their own children, realizing that just moments ago, they were in the chapel honoring their mother. Things like this can be easily prevented by planning and funding your final wishes. So much so where you'll be able to choose how you want to be celebrated. selecting your urn, selecting the casket, selecting your food, and even the floral arrangements. When my mom and dad passed away, knowing that they had pre-planned years and years ago made it so much easier for us to celebrate their lives in meaningful ways to us. So the question you have to ask is, planning your final wishes that important? Yes, it is. I can't stress the importance of doing so, because this becomes the last gift that you give the family that you love.
For all your money needs, Hawaiian Financial Federal Credit Union is here for you. Visit hificu.com.
Welcome back. I'm joined now by Jeff Short, sales manager at Valley of the Temples here in Hawaii. Jeff, you often encounter people who are really in a very, very difficult part of their life. How can a funeral service be healing?
Well, a funeral service, the families go through grief naturally, and that's the inward, feelings that they have. But a funeral service is the mourning process. It's the outward expression of their grief. And we saw it during the height of COVID, the challenges that families had. At one point you could only have 10 people at a service. So a lot of times families chose not to have that service, or they had the service but it was a lot smaller than they intended, and they didn't have that public mourning process. So they went through that healing process or that grieving process a lot slower than a lot of families that had an outward expression, 200-300 family members. And so a funeral service today, because there are no restrictions, allow families to have as many people as they'd like to have there. And when they hear stories of their loved one and how their life impacted others, and the families get to talk through those different details, that can help them move through that process a lot faster.
It's something that a lot of us don't really want to think about, but what are the benefits of pre-planning a funeral for yourself, or perhaps helping a family member do that for themselves?
The benefits of pre-planning are broken down into really two major categories. There's emotional benefits and then there's financial benefits. The emotional benefits are really found with the fact that you get to make these decisions together. So husbands and wives, significant others, 40, 50 years together, making all these decisions, get to look each other in the eye and find out what's important to them, how they want to be remembered, how they want their story to be told. And then when they pre-plan that out, then they don't have to wonder if they're doing the right thing for their loved one. They don't have to wonder if this is the right way to move forward in that process. So being able to do it together is really important. But financially, the other keys is that you get to lock in the price. You can't watch the news today without hearing about inflation and record inflation over the highest in the last 25 years. And anything that a family pre-plans at a cemetery mortuary, it locks in the price, and they don't have to worry about that going up. So our cemetery has been here since 1963, so we're celebrating our 60th anniversary, and it's not uncommon for us to look at contracts from the 70s where a family purchased a property for $200, and now today that property is worth $15,000, $20,000. And it's the exact same piece of land ultimately that they purchased 40, 50 years ago. And so you get to lock in the price when you pre-plan, and you get to make monthly payments. So as opposed to having to pay this all at once, usually 7 days before the service or the burial takes place, you get to make monthly payments. So oftentimes a family will choose to make payments over a 5-year period, and those payments can be as low as $40 a month, $80 a month. It just depends on how many generations they're looking to plan for and keep together. And the other benefit of pre-planning is because it's a lot easier on the family and it's a lot easier on our team, we provide discounts up front when they plan out. It really, having a plan in place prevents families from the disputing that can happen over all these decisions that have to be made at that time. And so it's a lot easier on our team because oftentimes we may be the mediator or caught in the middle of family members that have different beliefs on how they want to honor their loved ones. And so if they have a clear plan in place, then it prevents all of that, or hopefully prevents most of that. And so we provide an incentive for them to make these arrangements, hopefully 40, 50 years in advance.
So interesting. And tell me the difference between a cemetery and a mortuary, because that's really critical to planning this whole process.
It really is. And I know when I started almost 10 years ago in this profession, I didn't know the difference either. And a cemetery is that permanent resting place for a loved one where when you go to visit and pay your respects, everything that has to do with you visiting is the cemetery. It's that final resting place. But the mortuary is the place that you're going to need to call first. When a loved one passes away, the mortuary team is going to come out and bring the loved one into their care. And then they're going to do all the preparation behind the scenes. They're going to plan out a beautiful celebration of life with music, a DVD tribute, flowers, casket, urn. All of those details are handled by the mortuary. And then the mortuary transports as their final responsibility the loved one to the cemetery. So Valley of the Temples is very unique on Oahu because we have what's called a combo location. So as a cemetery, there's a mortuary and a crematory all together on one location.
Wow. And this can get pretty costly. You were talking about locking in the price. Generally speaking, what is the sort of ballpark figure for a cremation and a burial?
Yeah, so for that property, you might have a cremation property that could range anywhere from $3,000 to say $15,000 or more. It's up to a family. A lot of it depends on how many individuals of their family they'd like to keep together. We have families that will plan for one individual, or we'll have families that have 16, 20 interment rights so that their entire family can be kept together. A funeral service, though, you might have a cremation plan that could range anywhere from $2,000 up to $10,000. A lot of it comes down to the question if the family prefers to have their celebration of life before the cremation takes place or after the cremation takes place, and then the different decisions that go in with that.
So much to think about. Okay, we'll have to take a short break now. We'll have more with Jeff when we come back. You're watching Get Your House in Order. Stay with us.
Bringing you what matters. Viewers can receive the Star Advertiser digital full access subscription for just $9.95 per month. Go to staradvertiser.com and click on subscribe. Use the code AHITHING.
Welcome back. We are speaking today with Jeff Short, a sales manager at Valley of the Temples, about funeral planning and burial plans. Now, if you decide that, okay, I want to pre-plan this as sort of a, to take care of myself and also as a gift to my loved ones so that they don't have to deal with that stress, I come to you. How does that, walk me through this process?
Yeah, great question. Our experience of serving thousands of families per year have allowed us to put this into a very simple 3-step process. So the very first thing a family is going to do when they come in is we're going to go through a pre-planning guide. It's going to help them answer a lot of the questions that are going to be answered or going to need to be answered at that time. And that very first phase that we plan out is that permanent resting place. So in the United States, we're very unique amongst the world cemeteries that we have permanent entitlements. So when a family purchases a property, they own the rights to that property forever. That's not the case in Japan and other countries around the world. So the very first thing they have to decide is how many of the individuals of their family would they like to keep together. And by making that decision, it allows the rest of their siblings and maybe their children to plan around them so their family can have that multi-generational property. The phase after that is phase 2, and that's the merchandise and services that it requires to complete that cemetery property or to use that cemetery property. That's the labor involved with an interment or a placement of a casket. It's the protective vaults, and then most importantly, it's the memorial. The memorial can be made out of bronze or granite, but when you go to visit your loved one, that's the only thing that you're really going to see. And so that we can customize that with photos or favorite verses or poems or terms of endearment. It can be beautiful. It can really tell a story of a loved one. And then the final phase of pre-planning is the funeral services that we detailed. And the funeral services can be that celebration of life. We have 3 different chapels on Oahu, and so they can choose to have it maybe at their church, or they can have it in one of our chapels. There can be a celebration of life in the chapel. There can be bentos served on the lanai afterwards. And really the unique thing about being a combo location is they can, after their service in the chapel, oftentimes walk across the parking lot and the placement can be taken care of there. Maybe it's a drive to the back of our park, but it's very convenient for families. And families have the peace of mind of knowing that we can take care of all the decisions together in one location, and that the same team that they talked with in the beginning is going to be there to guide them through the whole process.
It's interesting when we talk about the funeral service itself, do people get involved with the music they want, the style they want, who's going to speak? I mean, how detailed do the pre-plans get?
It can be very detailed, all the way up into having the clothes hung in the closet, right? With maybe a USB flash drive that has the digital photos that they want to have on a DVD memorial tribute and the photo picked out on their memorial. We can get it all the way down to where the family only has to pick a time and a date. And that's a beautiful, really way to go. I can share with a story that we had the privilege of serving a family whose father had passed away over 10 years ago and was laid to rest at Valley of the Temples. And then now mom has passed away. And so we have 2 sons and 2 daughters in the room with us making arrangements for mom, but there wasn't anything planned out in advance. And so they came to an agreement that they wanted to have a traditional casket burial, and then they all agreed on having an open casket viewing. So from our standpoint, it's moving forward very smoothly. Everyone's in agreement. We came to the point where we wanted to make an oil canvas painting that's displayed maybe next to the guest sign-in book, or maybe it's to the right of the casket. And the photo they gave us, Mom had glasses on. And so it's natural for us to ask, the last time you have the chance to view Mom, do you want her to have her glasses on or glasses off? Someone's gonna have to answer that question. Well, the daughters were very clear. They said, Mom's been wearing glasses for 40, 50 years. I can't think of a time where I saw Mom without her glasses. So the last chance I have to view Mom, I want her to have her glasses on because that's how I remember her. And that's really easy. We start writing that down, but the boys jumped in and said, no, stop. Every time Mom went to bed at night, she took her glasses off and she put them on the nightstand because she was sleeping, because she was at peace. And we want to view her and pay our respects for the very last time, thinking of her at peace. And so now we're stuck. You can imagine these different discussions in a room. And I've never been to a service where you had half on, half off. And those are the type of decisions that families have to make. And those are sometimes maybe the smaller decisions that they don't think about. But because of the dynamics in the room, the emotion that's involved, the cost that can be involved, the permanence of the decisions, and the short compressed amount of time that they have to make these decisions, there's a lot of potential for disputing in that room. And so a family, it's just so much easier if they had a clear plan from Mom that said, you open up something like a pre-planning guide and it says in Mom's own handwriting, I hated those glasses, right? They never fit me right. For my open casket viewing, I don't want the glasses on. And so what we know is that everyone in that room wants to honor what Mom wants. They just don't know what it is unless she's written it out in advance. And so we can prevent that disputing and all those different areas and conversations if Mom writes them out in advance.
That makes so much sense. Well, still ahead, we're going to continue our conversation with Jeff. We're going to talk about how to make sure the service that you may be planning is a true celebration of life. That's after the break.
Windows Hawaii. Windows are not only designed to beautify your home, but also to make your home more secure, energy efficient, and virtually noise-proof. Contact Mario now for your free in-home estimate. 808-671-0808.
Welcome back. Valley of the Temple sales manager Jeff Short is joining us tonight. You've shared some incredible stories with us today. You have the benefit of having seen probably thousands of services. Tell us what makes the most meaningful service when you see a true celebration of life. What does that look like?
One of the key elements is the family knows that they're doing the right thing for their loved one. So if the loved one has taken the time to write out all the details. We often ask, who would you like to have giving your eulogy, and who would you like to have sharing your story? And sometimes families aren't certain on who that person is, but they might know for sure who they don't want giving their eulogy, and so they can have all those details out. But I've seen individuals where they've actually pulled their Harley Davidson into our chapel and it had an entire service around him and the group that he was a part of, and then everyone else rides their bikes into the park. I've seen services to where they've had, we helped custom design a memorial for someone who had been working on a classic car for 20 or 30 years in his garage. And we were able to make out of granite what's called a pedestal. It's a permanent resting place for an urn, and it looked just like his classic car out of granite, and then it would accommodate up to 4 urns in the future for his family to be together. And the car was a green color, so we even found a green granite for that. But that's the type of personalization that we are exceptional at Valley of the Temples, to allow a family to really tell their story.
Yeah, I think with this, we've acknowledged throughout that this can be difficult, but what do you wish people knew about this process and understood? Because like it or not, we're all going to get there, right? So we might as well take it on.
Absolutely. The details I would like them to know is there are experts that can guide them through this process, that have had experience serving thousands of families, that will give them every option. And that if they're nervous about that, I would say that's natural. But the process itself we've made very simple for them to go through. And by doing it in advance, you have the time that you need to look at every option and know that you're doing it the right way for your family, versus a family that loses a loved one and has to make all the decisions in a short amount of time. And so we encourage families to give us a call or to reach out to us online so that we can schedule a tour of our park They can receive a pre-planning guide for each member of their family. Everyone in the family might have different wishes and desires, and so that's okay. We want to be able to honor exactly what's right for their family and their loved ones.
And when we think about doing this in advance, how far in advance are we talking about? I mean, people think like, oh, I don't want to deal with this until I'm in my 80s, let's say.
Yeah, absolutely. But we find it very common that we'll help someone in their 20s or 30s pre-plan, 40s and 50s, of course. But right now we have that sandwich generation where they're planning for their parents as well. But then in that process, they realize, well, if I had the choice, I'd like to be next to my parents. And so now that they have made that decision, now they're going to have a property for themselves. And then in that decision, they said, well, we might as well have our kids there as well. And so now we have 3 generations or more. And that's a beautiful thing that you can have in the facilities, to have all generations of the family together.
When you go through this process with families, how do they feel on the other side of this? That they've done the pre-planning. It must take a huge weight off their shoulders.
Yeah, we hear peace of mind very consistently, that they're relieved, that they have clear direction. We call it a roadmap, and we're talking about, let's say there's a hike and you're on this beautiful path and you get to the end of the trail, and you're going into this thickly, heavily wooded forest, and there's a good chance that you could get lost. The question is, when would you like to have the map? Well, before you go in, before you get lost. The pre-planning guide, the pre-arrangements that we make for families, those are the roadmaps to follow to help their family navigate through a difficult time, and having all those answers in advance so that no one gets off track.
Yeah, and especially when you talked about people being in conflict. The story you told about the glasses, you would think that eyeglasses or no glasses, no big deal, but people can get really hurt.
You absolutely can, and there's over 100 questions that have to be answered when someone passes away. And we were just talking about eyeglasses, but just imagine a family that has disputes over cremation or casket burial, and the permanence of that and the emotion that's tied to those type of decisions. Pre-planning can prevent all of that.
Okay, you've given us so much to think about. Thank you for being here today, and thank you for watching. Remember, you can always review this show or watch it again by finding us on YouTube, or listen as a podcast wherever you get your podcasts. I'm Yunji Denise. Until next time, take care and aloha.